to that. And then I was like you, it's like this journey of how the pandemic changed everything, listening to YouTube more often, finding like-minded folks that share a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think for me, I don't know about you, but Gary says it a lot. I know others say it, but he really was like, you got a voice, just say your stuff, man. Tell them how you feel. Don't worry about saying something I've already said. If you feel the same way, they need to hear that more and more people feel the same way. And I found that so encouraging. You seem like you did too, but your creative outlet was just a little bit different. But it seemed like you were very inspired by their message, so to speak.
Well,
you do a YouTube channel too now, and you're kind of, I mean, you may look at it as more of just passing the time or sharing with people a little bit, but I think it's also just, it's almost like your expression in a lot of ways.
well, what I do like as a career, it's all about helping people and helping them to achieve their potential. So as a martial arts instructor, I deal with a lot of people who are over 40. So getting them to realize that they're not so limited as they would think. You get a lot of people that think that there are a lot of things that are so far above them, it's just not possible. And getting them to change that mindset into one of first, yes, these things are possible to do, and second, here let's design a pathway that you can kind of follow that will lead you to that to surpass your perceived limitations. And
Okay.
It's the same kind of thing where a lot of people think that like, well, I could never possibly create things like that. Like, really, if you look at stories of great literature and especially great 20th century literature, like if you look at Hemingway, Hemingway was great at taking sort of like mundane everyday life and making it interesting, making it sort of something that was intriguing. And everybody has a story like that. Everybody has, a point of view and their life experience that, if it's put down the right way and told the right way, it can be fascinating. And it can inspire people to have a different point of view. And I think as a society, we've gotten to this point where everything has just gotten to be so spoon fed, where we want immediate gratification. We want that. I'm a fan of old movies, and there used to be a subtext in movies. There used to be an implication of things that were happening that weren't necessarily shown on screen. Like you could put
Yep.
something up there, and it was just implied that something was happening. Well, if you put that to a modern audience, and you say like, yeah, this is the scene where like Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman are like, they just came back out in the living room, and like, well, that never happened. Like, well, they're not going to show those things, but you can kind of read between the lines. And today, if the audience isn't explicitly shown something, they don't perceive that it happened. Their attention span is moving so fast, they don't look at the space in between what you see. And I think it's a cause and effect kind of thing where, number one, they've been they've been spoon fed everything, where we're just going to show you everything that you need to know about the story, and it's done, and it's consumed and it's discarded. If you look at, I always refer to the $5 bin at Walmart, where you have all these movies just piled up in there that you could spend an hour just getting through the first half of looking at what's in there. And when you think about how many Academy Award winning movies are in there for $5, and it shows you how much people don't rewatch things. Like the things that people will rewatch are very, very rare. And like those of us that grew up in like sort of a nerdy culture, and we were the ones that were like, we were shunned because we liked these things. I was the comic book nerd. I was like, the Star Wars nerd. I was like, Um, I wasn't the popular kid, and um, these franchises were a refuge. It was like, there were great stories, and now you come along, you fast forward like 40 years later, and it's become it's a hip thing. Like, you
Yeah,
see
it's
all
cool and hip.
the guys that were in high school, like on the football team, wearing like Star Wars shirts and superhero shirts. You're like, wait a second, like now you're realizing that these are actually good stories, and to have them sort of like, all right, yeah, but now it's not for you anymore. It's like we're going to take it over, and it's like it's almost like being bullied all over again. It's like,
Hmm.
I'm going to take your lunch money and I'm going to go spend it on myself. It's like I'm going to go
Right.
take your passion and I'm going to make it for more for me. And there's a considerable amount of frustration that goes along with that, and so a lot of the YouTube crowd here is sort of it's giving voice to people who again don't realize that they can have an impact, that their voice matters. It's like when my old job, I worked in a supermarket for 17 years, and one of the things that you learn is that the customer up front at the desk yelling at your customer service person there is not your worst customer. Your the biggest problem you have is the customer that has a full shopping cart there and they push it off to the side and they walk out the door and don't say a thing.
Yep.
Because the vocal person will tell you what the problem is. The other person, you have no idea why they
Yep.
left. So you
I'll
don't know
never
what
go
to
back.
fix.
Yep. I'll never go
And
back. Yep.
and that's it's a good thing and a bad thing about like what we have with YouTube. Because we are telling the the seller, who are the Warner Brothers, the Disneys, the
Right.
Lucasfilm, um, we're telling them what the problem is, and they're sitting there saying like, "No, that's not the problem. You're the problem." And like, okay, so I'll go and put my money elsewhere.
Yep.
And instead of going and buying a new Superman figure, maybe somebody would want like, hey, you know what? I'm spending more time um, watching YouTube people. So I'm going to go buy their T-shirts. I'm going to go buy a Drunk 3PO T-shirt. I'm going to go buy a Neurotic coffee. I'm going to go buy a quartering, hat or whatever.
Yep.
And it's changing. It's like, and I think it's only a matter of time. And you see what Eric July's doing, creating his own comic book universe. I think he's one of the people that are going to say, you know what, I'm going to make this, and it's going to fill in that space like Ethan Van Sciver does with his Cyberfrog.
Yep.
He goes along and he's creating his own, saying like, whereas people always used to think like, well, you can't do that because it's just like you need the
Yep.
printing companies, you need all that. Now you don't.
It was
Like
cost
you said,
prohibitive and limited distribution and
Yeah. Right? And I'm not playing.